So off camera, what I did is pulled the engine back out of there. I pulled the engine and transmission back out of there. What I'm doing is making some notes on the dimension of that existing bracket, and I've located the front of the bracket in reference onto the frame rail. What I also did is I want to shoot it this way so that it doesn't get blown out by that door. What I also did was lowered the rear end so that the frame was fairly level. And when I say fairly level, it's not it's off an eighth of a bubble, but that's probably as close as I'm going to get it with those jack stands. I could always jack the front up and get it so that it is level, but I don't really think that's required. I just wanted to get it pretty close to level so that I kind of knew what I was working with. As you can see, it is pretty close to level, and if you look at that existing front motor mount that had the Ford engine bolted to it, it's pitched back. So why they did that, I have no idea really, unless that's the way the engine sat in there at a slight angle, raised higher in the front than it was in the rear. But again, I don't know that. I just wanted to mention one other thing. Last night I was on the internet kind of exploring what options are, and again, this is that existing Ford motor mount, but it's kind of similar to the mount on the front of the Cummins engine. In other words, it's a flat plate with two bolts that come up through. What I kind of found on there was a 1-inch thick rubber puck that can go in between there. Now, when I say rubber, it's not really rubber, it's poly. But it's bushed, and it is designed for a front motor mount. And ironically, it came from that same company that I bought the rear motor mounts for. If I had seen it, or if I had known, and so what I did was go on the internet and kind of, again, looked for something that I thought would be similar to this, which would be a long piece of rubber or poly, with bushings that would go, the bolts would go down through, and I didn't find that. But what I did find was those rubber pucks, and I found a picture of one under a mount, and the mount wasn't this mount. I don't even think it was for a Cummins. It could have been for a Detroit or a Cat, but they had a similar flat mount with two rubber pucks under it, and that got me thinking, well, I could probably just use them in between, underneath this and in between the flat channel plate that goes on there. So put a round rubber puck in each bolt hole, and that's fine. Doesn't matter whether it's a flat plate on the bottom. But anyways, there it is. The next thing that I'll be doing is cutting that bracket out, and I'm not going to show that to you. I've showed you enough of that. So I'm going to be cutting it out, trying to get it out more than I did up here, because I've got some things that are going in back here. That's where that new motor mount is going to bolt to the frame. So I want to try and clean that up back there as good as possible. So what I'm probably actually going to be doing is trying to grind them rivets off and see if I can pop them out that way. I'll bring you back after I'm done with it and let you know how I did it. Now there's a front engine mount off of the Cummins, or it's on the Cummins right now, but for the Cummins. And I'm showing it to you because I want you to keep it in mind when I take you back over to what I'm building here. This is going to be the front motor mount for the haul truck, the Cummins engine. And why I had to extend this thing out here is because those pucks that I was talking about is going to overlap the edge of the channel iron. So what I did is welded on this piece of angle iron to accept the overlap of that. And I will show you it more clearly once I get it ground off and can set the pucks on. I don't want to set the pucks on it while it's really hot. So when I get it ground off, I will bring you back and show you this more clearly. So here is that plate, and what I've got it, I just got it set up on some jack stands. So what's going to happen is that engine comes in, that'll sit down there, the two pucks, the holes will go through right about there, and there, and the two pucks will kind of overlap that thing. Basically, most of the weight will be distributed on the channel iron, but the pucks will overlap onto that angle iron, and I just wanted that angle iron there to provide some more rigidity, to keep the bottom of the pucks on an even plane. Let me shut you off and take you over to the other side and show you what I plan on doing. Okay, we're over to the other side, and again, I've just got this supported up on some angle iron. Just so happens that the bottom or the top of this, where I wanted it, sits pretty close to the bottom of that bracket. Now that bracket is just a spacer bracket. It actually serves no purpose except to the front of the bracket. As you can see, it's a pretty thick bracket. The front of the bracket holds that radiator support on it. So what it is a spacer between the frame rails to support and hold the frame rails apart, to support and hold the radiator support. And it's in that location because it needs to be stiff for the spring shackles, which are right there in the front. You wouldn't want to land the front spring shackles onto a frame without a cross member across there, because you could have, every time you get a spring action on the thing, you would have a twisting effect to the frame rails. Okay, back on the support. So it's pretty close to that. Let me show you what I originally planned on doing. What I originally planned on doing was making a bracket that came out here and then curved down and hung down, and what I would do is weld that channel iron to it. Well, what the problem is, and that's kind of a look at it, if you had a view of it, it would sit like that and it would hang down and that channel iron would be supported to it. What the whole problem is this is one side of the frame rail, the driver's side of the frame rail. And to begin with, I had bought that 2.5-inch angle iron, but for some reason, it's 2 1/4 up here. It's 3 inches down here. And the same thing happens on the other side. And I understood that it took a twist, but it doesn't take a straight twist. It tapers off. It rolls down there and there. And the problem with this side, passenger side, the frame rail is actually rolled up. So what I did is I started thinking about it, and the engine mount is going to be close to this bracket. I'm thinking maybe I could butt this engine mount right up to this cross member support in here. What I'll do is I'll weld it onto that, because I'm not really welding on frame rails, I'm welding on a cross support, so don't have the potential of weakening frame rails. So welding on a cross support, and then what I'll do is I'll make a bracket that'll come down here, and I can get support in for the channel or channel iron off of the side up here too. So what I'm going to do is just make a bracket that'll fit into the straight part of the frame, and then what I'll do is angle a piece of metal down to it so that it'll cross support it, or it's kind of like a gusset plate, an angled gusset plate. Can't really call it a gusset plate because it doesn't it passes over an open space, but you get the idea. Plate in there, and then off of that plate would be a piece of metal coming down that I could weld it to. But anyways, there it is. This one is 5 inches lower. Now, what I might do is just pick this engine back up again, pick the engine transmission back up again, shimmy it in here, and just with this thing still sitting on the jack stands, just kind of sit it in position to make sure that the elevation is going to be right. But I will bring you back if I do that. Okay, since the last video clip that I just did, I said that I was going to probably bring the engine over and test fit it into it, and I did. So that support is still up on stands, and here it is. Now, I have the engine block slightly pitched back in relationship to the frame rails. And I do not have the transmission down the way it should be. That was smart. Level got stuck in it. Okay, let's start analyzing it. If you want to look at it, go back to video part 25 and you'll see it. In part 25, when I first put it in and sat it on the original motor mount up front, this engine mount was almost exactly parallel with that. So I have gained probably 2 inches forward space. I have lowered it 5 inches because I do not have the 1 inch pucks in there. So I was going to lower it 4 inches, so I set the thing down 5 inches, taking into account the 1 inch pucks, which would lower the engine 4 inches. But I do not have the pucks in there. I think it still has to be lowered some. I want to just throw this little insert in there because you guys probably think this thing is going on forever about putting this engine in, but it's really important, and let me just explain a couple of points about it. First of all, I have to get the geometry of this engine right into that frame. I don't want to be just sticking something in there that's going to be burning out universals joints because I didn't get it in there right. I didn't get the angles close enough, and the universals are too far offset. The second thing that I'm kind of looking at as far as that goes, and I keep second guessing myself, you have to understand that this engine produces a lot of torque, and it's in a truck that's going to be driven for a lot of miles over roads that are bumpy. And there's going to be a lot of stress and strain put on these motor mounts, not only because of the engine load, but also the road conditions and the mileage, the use that it's going to be, the number of hours it's going to be subjected to these things. So that's why I kind of am doing a long video or videos on this subject about the engine, getting the engine mounted into the frame and producing something that I think is going to last. And a lot of it has to do with human personality or whatever you want to call it. But you know, I do keep second guessing myself. Like, go back to the clip where I was talking about putting that front motor mount in, and I said that the frame rails took a twist. You shouldn't have called it a twist, I should have called it an angle, and then it offset down. Do you know how many times that I looked at that motor mount? I looked at that motor mount, but I really didn't see that motor mount. I should have seen that it not only angled down, but it also offset. I looked at that motor mount hundreds of times, but I didn't really see it. So that's the things that I keep second guessing myself about. Am I really looking at this from the right perspective? Am I really looking at it at all? Or am I just seeing it? It's like listening to somebody. Do you really hear what they're saying, or you just kind of brushing it off? But anyways, I just wanted to throw that in there. So once we get past, and I want to say this again, I've said it before, I'm not sure if it's in the video that you've seen, but it will be said again. Once we get past this stage of getting the motor and transmission mounted in there, the clips will start progressing over with a lot more work being done in them, or how you see it will be with a lot more work, because I really wanted to get an involved video on figuring out how to mount this engine in there and how the mounts should be built to sustain the engine, transmission, its horsepower, torque, but also road conditions that it'll be subjected to, and have a component that will last. I mean, I could leave it like that and set the engine at a little bit more of an angle. But I don't see any adverse effect in that. Do I see an adverse effect in it? I know that the oil pickup on the 6.7 and 5.9 is up in the front here. Would that bother me if I put an angle on it? Do I want to take that chance? I wonder how, if the engine sat in there level and when they build them, or if they angle it back. But anyways, you can see it. I mean, if I left it in that position, it would still have to come up an inch, but before, this cooling port was like up in here. And I just stuck that filter on there just to make sure. I mean, if worst case comes to worst, if I can't get it out from above, because you take into account the exhaust manifold turbocharger, etc., have got to go on above that. So if I can't get it out above, which I should be able to, I should be able to drop it down, bring it over or up. I don't know. Let me, do I want to lower the front another inch? If I lowered another inch, I've got to really modify how that thing was setting, because I originally I was going to kind of weld it to a piece on the bottom, but I guess I could get a piece of angle iron, bigger angle iron, bolt across the bottom of this thing, and weld the backside of this mount to the angle iron at a lower location, at an inch lower location. I could do that. I could do that very feasibly. But anyways, you know, here again, I'm walking around here and thinking of things as I'm trying to talk to you. Got the camera running. I'll bring you back. I'll let you know. I'm probably just going to think about it overnight, and I'll let you know what my plans are going to be. Okay, I left you yesterday telling you that I was going to think about it overnight, about lowering this engine more, and I thought about it, and I'm going to do it. It is just the way it's sitting right now, and I know that it's pitched just way too much. It's about 2 inches in relationship to the frame, just over the span of from the front of the block to the back of the block where the head sits. It's pitched 2 inches, and that's way too much. What I'm going to do, and I kind of referenced this cross member in a previous video about it not being much of anything, just more radiator support and stiffening of the frame rails. What I'm going to do is, I've got this piece of 4-inch angle iron. I'm going to bolt this on the bottom of it, on the bottom of this cross member. I'm just sitting it there so that you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to bolt it on the bottom of it. But what I'm going to do is take that piece of channel iron that is supporting the engine now, and it's going to be welded on this side so that it drops it down lower. Now what I'll do is I'll gusset it, and what I'll do is I'll still support this channel iron by legs coming down off of the frame, because that motion, or that twisting force on it by this engine sitting on the outside edge of it is probably be too much just for this frame member. So I want to also support it off of the side. So what I'll do is I'll bring a piece down to it that will help stiffen that thing, is stiffen it and support it better. So that's what I'm gonna do. So my plans are, it's probably gonna drop down 2.5 to 3 inches. So and what I'll do is I'll show you that. I'll just do a brief video on how much I'm gonna do it and how I determined how much I was gonna do it. Bring it back. Okay, so here's a bracket, and I've got it tacked up. I'm gonna go over and just test fit it, make sure everything is good before I start drilling the holes, put the gussets on, and welding it out. So I'll bring you back when I get over there. Okay, so there it is in the frame, and that's what I'm gonna go with. I've got it lined up. It's on the edge there. on the edge there. I've got it centered up in the, I squared it down to that line. It doesn't look like it's exactly in the center of that hole, but that hole might be off. But actually what I'm going to do is mark it and mark the hole locations, figure out where I can put the gussets in there to help support it also, and we'll be going from there. I'll bring you back. Okay, there's that motor mount back in again, and it's bolted on. Now I've got that jack stand under there only because I just want to be safe than sorry before I get these side mounts that is going to kind of support it from the frame rail. Before I get them in there, and I'm going to set that engine on there, I just don't want it to bend down at all. So I stood on it before I put that jack stand in there, and I got no movement out of it at all. But I'd rather be safe than sorry. So what I did is filmed the building of this thing, and that will be put in a shop update. So what I'm going to do, set the engine back in here again, and then I've got to kind of come up with the mounts for the back. So going to set the engine back in here again and come up with those mounts, and then after I'm all done, I will take this thing out, weld it out, get the holes in it for the motor mount, and get everything painted up underneath there. I want to paint it before I put that piece back in there again, so that it's painted underneath the piece also. But I'll bring you back. Okay, so I have set it in place again. This is the same day as the last clip. I've even got the 1-inch bushings under it, so that is where it's going to sit. I am very happy with that, very happy with it. Now what I've got to do is work on the rear motor mounts. Get something going on that, and then I will, once I get those things in place, I will pull the engine back out again, get the motor mounts welded out completely, paint underneath where the motor mounts go, and paint the motor mounts so that I can get the engine transmission back out again, paint the rest of the frame, and get the motor mounts in place for their final installation. Now, one of the things that I have to do, I'm really kind of happy with it, and I've got plenty of clearance from the axle to the bottom of the pan too. One of the things that I'm really happy about is it's kind of sitting low in the frame, which is going to give me a lower center of gravity on this truck. Not that the truck is that high to begin with, but once you start getting the cab back on it, the cab makes it a little kind of top heavy under normal circumstances, but with the engine in a lower center of gravity, that won't really happen. It'll be, the center of gravity will be lower. What was I going to say? Oh, these rear motor mounts. I'm going to think about it overnight. I'm probably not going to do anything, but the thing that I was thinking about doing is coming up logically with that thing to get it in there. I might have to redo these so that let me shut you off a second. Now I will go get it and bring it back. The bushings that go in there. Let me go get them. So there are the bushings. What I was thinking, what I was considering when I was looking at this mount is the center line of the hole, and I understand that this would be underneath, but would the bushing itself overlap the side of this and be into the frame rail? And that is a very good possibility. Now let me just run something by you. I might take these off and refabricate them. Let me just run something by you. Before I was talking about having to get this motor out. So the front motor mount the engine will come up off of it. This one, the thing is going to be underneath, so it could come up off of it, but will that in fact be the case? So if it is the case, all they have to do is unbolt it, or all I have to do is unbolt it and pull it up. But then again, if you wanted to pull it out at an angle so that you would drop the back, you pull the transmission out, drop the back, and pick the front up at an angle so that you can get it out that way, you can always take the bolts off of the side of the flywheel housing that holds that mount on. So you have a couple of options there. The rear of this transmission, I don't see me having an option other than putting something across here that's going to grab these two things. But anyways, I'll bring you back. It'll probably be tomorrow before I really get into this again, but I'll bring you back. Okay, I'm going to break this video up into two parts, 27A, 27B. It's just too long for one section or one part. Way too long. Nobody's going to want to sit through this whole thing, even though you could fast forward it, but it'd probably be better off breaking it up into two sections. Maybe you can see over my left-hand shoulder that the engine is in, and it's kind of test fitted with the rear mounts and everything. So that's what's coming next. There's also going to be some on part B, there's also going to be some on the radiator and also that head. I told you I got the nozzles out in chapter 26. Well, I did get part of the nozzles out, but it turns out it wasn't all of the nozzles, so I'll address that. So this is the end of part A. Part B will be probably posted tomorrow.